We usually think of a national border as, well, a very physical thing, like a permanent line on a map.
Right. You picture a checkpoint or, handing your passport to a customs agent.
Exactly. You cross that physical line, and boom, the laws of the country you just left, they just stop applying to you. It's clean. It's just pure geography.
Yeah, I mean, that concept of territorial sovereignty is basically the operating system for the entire modern world. You are subject to the laws of the soil you're literally standing on.
But when you look at the current geopolitical landscape, and specifically we're talking about Canada, China, and Hong Kong today, that physical border starts looking, honestly, like an illusion.
Oh, totally. The boundaries are blurring in real time.
Yeah, so today we are doing a deep dive into a really complex stack of sources. We're unpacking government data on immigration and trade, reports from human rights organizations, business advisories, and some highly opinionated commentary pieces.
It is a lot of material to get through.
It is. And before we get into it, I need to put a mandatory neutrality disclaimer right here at the top. These sources contain some very politically charged viewpoints regarding domestic Canadian politics, international relations, and foreign governments. So, we are not taking any sides or endorsing the viewpoints of these authors or governments. Our goal is strictly to impartially report on the content provided and help you understand the ideas contained in the original source material.
Right, we're just laying out what the documents say.
Yeah.
Connecting the dots for you.
Exactly. Our mission today is to connect those dots between overseas security laws, international corporate risks, immigration bottlenecks, and this much broader ideological battle of global orders. We want to ground this in how it actually affects your understanding of global politics. So, okay, let's unpack this. We're going to start with a really visceral, real-world example of these geopolitical shifts in action.
Because to understand the macro impact, you really have to see how it hits, a single human life. The abstract policy always lands on a real person eventually.
Right. So let's look at the story of Zhang Xinyan. She is a 55-year-old activist and a practitioner of Falun Gong.
Which is banned in China.
Banned in China, right. So she fled to Thailand way back in 2014. And she actually holds official UN refugee status. She did everything by the book.
Okay, so she has the international paperwork.
Exactly. But fast forward to May 2026. She gets arrested in Thailand, allegedly for just overstaying a visa. Now, Canada actually steps in. The Canadian government arranges her resettlement. They do all the checks, and they book her a flight to Vancouver. It looks like a guaranteed escape.
But it wasn't.
No, that guarantee completely evaporates the literal day she arrives at the airport.
Because the Thai police suddenly intervene. Right, they block her from boarding.
Yeah, they pull her right out of the departure process. And the reason, and this is wild, but the reason is that Hong Kong police have a 200,000 Hong Kong dollar bounty on her.
Wow.
Yeah, which is roughly 17,000 Canadian dollars. And this is for alleged subversion related to the Hong Kong Parliament, which is like an overseas shadow legislature group.
Right, an activist group.
Yeah. And Human Rights Watch explicitly calls this incident ongoing transnational repression just to please Beijing. But I have to ask you, I have to push back on the basic mechanics of this.
Sure, go for it.
If she has official UN refugee status, right, and a plane ticket to Canada, how does a domestic Hong Kong law stretch all the way into a Thai airport terminal to pull her out of line?
Yeah, what's fascinating here is how the Hong Kong Security Bureau publicly views this. They've explicitly warned that fugitives cannot harbor this illusion that they can just evade criminal liability by fleeing the territory.
So they don't even pretend their jurisdiction stops at the border anymore.
Not at all. And the mechanism making it happen isn't, Hong Kong police flying to Bangkok with a badge. It's economic statecraft. Successive Thai governments have a really well-documented history of prioritizing their relationship with Beijing over these international human rights obligations.
So it's about the money.
Always. I mean, Thailand's economy is incredibly intertwined with Chinese infrastructure, tourism, trade. So Beijing uses that massive economic gravity to basically compel a sovereign nation to do the blocking for them.
So they're essentially like deputizing foreign police forces through economic pressure.
Precisely. They are successfully projecting domestic security laws globally.
Okay, so if a physical person holding a UN document can get pulled out of an international airport by this law, it feels like corporate data sitting on a server just doesn't stand a chance. Which brings us to the boardroom.
Right, because it's not just activists caught in this net, it's multinational corporations too.
Yeah, the legal mechanisms they use to pursue individuals are the exact same ones terrifying foreign businesses right now. So let's look at the new rules under Article 43 of the Hong Kong National Security Law, or the NSL. These just took effect on March 23, 2026.
And they are sweeping.
Totally sweeping. Under these rules, police can compel warrantless access to electronic devices and physical premises. But the terrifying detail for businesses is that there are absolutely zero justifiable grounds for refusal.
Not at all.
None. You can't say, oh, I need to protect my trade secrets. You can't say no.
And if you try to say no, the penalties for noncompliance are immediate.
Oh.
The sources say it's a year in prison and a fine of 100,000 Hong Kong dollars.
Which is about 17,500 Canadian. But the prison time is the real kicker. I mean, I'm just trying to picture being a mid-level compliance officer at a Canadian bank, right? The sources note that 7 Canadian financial institutions operate in Hong Kong.
Right, 7 big ones.
Yeah. And under Canadian law, they're strictly required to protect sensitive client data. It's not a suggestion, it's the law. So it sounds like corporate executives are being handed a stick of dynamite. On one side, Canadian privacy law says don't open the vault, and on the other, Hong Kong law says open the vault or go to jail.
It's an absolute paradox. They are trapped between 2 entirely incompatible legal systems.
How does a multinational business even function in that environment?
Well, functionally, they are forced to reconsider everything. Because to understand why a bank's data is suddenly a matter of state security, you have to look at the Chinese Communist Party's doctrine. They call it holistic national security.
Holistic national security. What does that actually mean in practice?
Well, in the West, we generally define national security around, military defense, counterterrorism, border protection. But the CCP's framework extends into economic domains, technological development, culture, everything.
So a client list or corporate research is seen as an economic security asset.
Yes, exactly. Now, the authorities claim these powers won't be used for routine street-level searches. But the business advisories in our stack highlight that the hidden enforcement risks are immense. I mean, look at the precedent.
Right, the 2023 raids.
Yeah, the 2023 raids on foreign due diligence firms on the mainland. Or look at Jimmy Lai, the Hong Kong media tycoon who was also an Ontario hotelier. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison under these frameworks. When national security is defined as anything affecting the state's stability, any corporate data could be demanded.
It just completely strips foreign businesses of any legal shield.
It does. It forces companies to ask if they can safely keep their servers or their people in the region at all.
And that leads perfectly into our next point. Because with these mounting pressures, the human risk for activists, the massive liability for businesses, citizens are understandably looking for the exit. They are seeking safe harbor.
And many are looking toward Canada.
Right. So let's pivot to how Canada has structurally responded to this exodus and honestly why the system is buckling, because the intent was there. In June 2021, Canada actually launched Special Permanent Residence, or PR, pathways specifically for Hong Kong residents.
And those expire soon, right?
Yeah, they expire in August 2026. But the numbers from the government data are just staggering. As of October 2024, they received over 26,500 applications.
Wow.
Right, and they've approved over 10,500. But here's where it gets really interesting. They have refused fewer than 200.
Less than 200 refused out of all those processed. That is an incredible approval to refusal ratio.
Exactly. It proves these applicants are highly educated, they legitimately meet the criteria, they are ready to contribute. But the bottleneck is insane. The wait times are stretching well past 2027.
Some people are just stuck?
Completely stuck. The government had to introduce a Band-Aid solution in May 2024. They created a new public policy granting open work permits just so these applicants don't lose their legal status while they wait.
So they can at least work while they're in this massive backlog.
Right. But I have a major question here. If Canada intentionally created these pathways to promote democratic values and offer a lifeline, why place them in an immigration category that is actively shrinking?
What do you mean shrinking?
Well, the data shows that this specific humanitarian and compassionate target drops from 13,750 spaces in 2024 all the way down to 4,300 spaces in 2027. Why build a dedicated escape hatch and then shrink the door to get through it?
Yeah, it reveals a huge disconnect between political promises and bureaucratic realities. See, the core issue is that public policies like this Hong Kong pathway, they don't actually get specific country-allocated admission spaces.
Oh, so they're just thrown into a general pile.
Exactly. The bureaucracy lumps them into a generalized bucket called humanitarian and compassionate and other. And processing operates strictly on a first and first out basis across that entire category.
So they're competing with every other global crisis for a shrinking number of spots.
Yeah, and the government report attributes this massive backlog to, quote, the unpredictability of global events.
Which is just bureaucratic deflection.
Totally, it's a structural failure. You have tens of thousands of highly qualified applicants funneled into a bucket that the government decided to slash. So the system just log jams.
It's just wild. So, okay, having explored this sort of bureaucratic nightmare of actually arriving in Canada, let's shift to the cultural reality these newcomers face once they actually get there. Because they're holding these temporary work permits, they're waiting years for PR, and we have this really poignant opinion piece from a Substack called Canadian Returnee that untacks this.
It is a very stark look at domestic societal tensions.
It really is. The author argues that there is this profound double standard in Canadian empathy. They describe it as a color line.
A color line, right?
Yeah. They point out that white passing refugees like folks fleeing kinetic wars in Ukraine or Syria are generally welcomed with massive community support, church sponsorships, welcome drives, all of that. But Hong Kongers who are fleeing the systematic erasure of their civil liberties, they often face suspicion or just apathy.
The author specifically mentions the stereotype that people assume Hong Kongers are all wealthy, or that the danger isn't real simply because bombs aren't falling.
Right. It's like the Substack author essentially paints a picture of two doors into Canada's empathy. One is wide open with a welcome mat, and the other requires you to constantly prove you aren't some sort of political or economic liability.
And it goes deeper than just street-level prejudice, too.
Oh, definitely. The pushback is coming from the business community and even within the diaspora.
This is where we have to apply some analytical rigor and look at the underlying economics. The hesitation to embrace these newcomers is deeply entangled with massive economic dependencies. We have to remember Canada has a $118.7 billion bilateral merchandise trade relationship with China.
$118 billion. That is a massive dependency.
Massive. So the author notes that Canadian businesses and some diaspora members who have material interests in China, they show real hesitation to hire someone with a recent Hong Kong background. They just dismiss the human rights concerns as being, too political for the workplace.
We even have a snippet from Global News in the source stack showing that dozens of Chinese-Canadian community groups actually publicly side with Beijing's stance on Taiwan. It really shows how fractured the diaspora is.
It does, and it ties back to historical narratives. For a long time, the prevailing talking point was about China's economic reforms lifting millions out of poverty in the 90s and 2000s.
Which did happen.
It did happen, objectively. But people cling to that outdated narrative to justify their current business ties while willfully ignoring the current reality of a very authoritarian, centralized surveillance state. The Substack author even notes that some Canadians will accurately diagnose these broken systems, but then they just refuse to fix them. They treat any attempt at reform as a form of surrender.
Which just leaves these newcomers completely isolated. So all of this domestic friction we're talking about, it's really just a microcosm of a much larger global crisis. Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. What does this all actually mean for the future of international relations?
Right, because this isn't just about trade or local hiring practices. It's about fundamentally competing worldviews.
Exactly. We have a piece from the Sunday Guardian that frames this beautifully. It argues that Canada's choice, and really the West's choice, isn't just a binary between the US and China. It's a choice between two entirely different philosophies of global order.
And they call the Western approach ethical realism.
Ethical realism, the idea that prosperity follows liberty and the rule of law. Opposed to that is the CCP model, where a citizen's identity, their economy, their rights are entirely defined and granted by the state.
And the evidence of this model expanding is terrifying. Look at China's ethnic unity law.
Right, which came into force on July 1st, 2026.
Yeah. Amnesty International released a very severe warning about it. It essentially entrenches the forced assimilation of Uyghurs, Tibetans, and Mongolians. It criminalizes the promotion of minority languages or human rights advocacy.
And the most chilling part, the part that connects all the way back to our first story about Zhang Xinyan being pulled out of the airport in Thailand, is that this ethnic unity law explicitly claims extraterritorial reach.
Meaning peaceful advocacy literally anywhere on the planet could be deemed as undermining ethnic unity.
Anywhere. So what does this all mean? How should the average listener process this massive geopolitical shift where a domestic law in Beijing applies to a street in Vancouver?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you could see that China's ethnic unity law and the Hong Kong national security law are just two sides of the same coin. It is a concerted effort to redefine international norms. The post-World War II liberal democratic order was based on inherent rights. The CCP model dictates that the state grants rights and therefore can revoke them globally, completely ignoring physical borders.
Okay, but let me push back on this. The article mentions Mark Carney speaking at Davos, right? And he argues that middle powers like Canada and the EU should partner up so they don't have to just choose between the US and China. They have immense combined economic power. But with $118 billion in trade and 1.8 million Canadians of Chinese origin, is ethical realism just a pipe dream? Like, can Canada realistically decouple its values from its wallet?
That is the trillion-dollar question. Complete decoupling is probably impossible without catastrophic economic damage. But what Carney and others advocate for isn't isolation, it's coalition building. Middle powers have to leverage their combined defense and economic weight to push back against this extraterritorial overreach. You don't have to cut all trade, but you absolutely have to stop pretending that economic engagement will magically lead to democratic reform.
You have to de-risk.
Exactly. You have to de-risk the relationship.
Wow. Okay, we have covered a massive amount of ground today. Let's just summarize this journey. We started with Zhang Xinyan, trapped in a Thai airport, showing how economic statecraft projects domestic laws globally. We moved to corporate executives paralyzed by legal trapdoors over sensitive data.
Then to the immigrants caught in this shrinking bureaucratic backlog.
Right, and facing cultural suspicion fueled by, billions of dollars in trade dependencies. And finally, we zoomed out to this fundamental clash of worldviews between inherent liberty and state-dictated identity.
And for you listening, I think the real takeaway is that being well-informed today means looking past the headlines. You have to see how foreign laws are directly, actively impacting domestic realities. It's happening right now.
It is. Which brings me to a final, sort of provocative thought I want to leave you with. Something to mull over on your own that builds on all this. We talked about how physical borders are blurring and how economic leverage allowed a law to reach a Thai airport. But as artificial intelligence and global surveillance networks advance at this breakneck speed, will the concept of transnational repression even require physical passports or airports in the future?
Oh, that is a dark thought.
Think about it. If laws like the Ethnic Unity Law and the NSL claim global jurisdiction, your digital footprint might soon be subject to foreign laws without you ever leaving your hometown. Your data crosses borders at the speed of light. So that physical line on the map isn't just blurring in the digital age, it might have already disappeared.
The jurisdiction of the future is digital.
Exactly. Something to think about next time you log on.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the sources. Stay curious, everyone.